So at this time, I'd like to introduce Andy Rodenstrike, President of Alabama, who is going to moderate our session and ask our panelists to please join us.
Each one of our speakers has to go through security real quick before we allow them up on the stage. So give us 1 minute to get set up. That's right, to get in the room. With us 3 distinguished panelists today to, in essence, talk about where we are in the industry, where they see the industry is heading, where they see the industry's been, what are kind of the hot topics, and some good information I think that might be enlightening for all of us. Let me go ahead and introduce the non-terrorists first. Remember, that's on.
I'm holding it close.
That's right.
I mean, you're going to drop the bomb shelter?
That's right. In no particular order, let me introduce first Mr. Terry Armont. Terry, will you raise your hand so we know who you are? Terry is Senior Vice President, Development of Global Tower Partners. He oversees all leasing and new site development activities for the company. Terry has spent 22 years in the wireless industry and previously served as Senior Vice President, Deployment for SpectraSite Communications, and prior to that was Director of System Development of the Northeast for AT&T Wireless and formerly of McCall Cellular. For those of you who don't know much about Global Tower Partners, it is the 4th largest tower company with over 2,400 owned towers and over 6,000 managed towers and rooftop properties across the U.S. The company was founded in 2002 by industry leaders in the rooftop management and tower industry to be a leading owner, developer, and manager of outsourced antenna sites in North America. Thank you for being here, Terry.
Thank you.
Next, let me introduce Mr. Doug Huff.
Hello.
Doug is Senior Vice President for Site Operations and Services of American Tower Corporation. In that role, Doug is responsible for the U.S. tower financing, operations, engineering, redevelopment, and procurement and asset integrity. So we're glad you found a few minutes to come join us today because you are very busy.
Very pleased to be here.
He's been with American Tower for about 6 years, which has been his complete experience in the wireless industry, so he's getting it firsthand. Prior to joining American Tower 6 years ago, he was with a company called
Manitowoc.
Manitowoc, thank you. Manitowoc Company. He was with them for 10 years. They are a $2.9 billion New York Stock Exchange Fortune 500 company that, as I understand it, builds cranes that we see in heavily areas that are under heavy construction. He held various senior management positions in the Marine and Construction Division of Manitowoc Company. He graduated from Eastern Michigan University with a degree in accounting and finance. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Doug Wiest. Doug joined National Grid Wireless in 2002 as president and CEO of the wireless business. The business began in the startup mode and has grown to close to $100 million in revenue. Most of the growth is through 5 acquisitions which were completed for a total of $200 million. Besides adding towers and dark fiber assets to the company, the first and largest neutrally hosted distributed antenna systems, which we saw this morning in Connie's presentation, was designed, built, and deployed, with several more built in the pipeline. Before being with National Grid Wireless, Mr. Wiest was the COO of American Tower. I think Doug, you left just before Doug Huff came on. During his tenure at American Tower, the company went from the startup mode to over $700 million in revenue. And Doug managed the tower services and manufacturing divisions as well as the IT development. Doug also assisted in raising both debt and equity used for the tower acquisitions and internal tower development, and managed an annual capital budget in excess of $450 million, which I think is not the household budget you manage now, right? Prior to being with American Tower, Doug managed the Southeast operations as a startup for Nextel, so he's been on the carrier side. Prior to Nextel, he managed site development for McCaw Communications. And prior to McCaw, he worked at Pacific Telesys, a regional Bell operating company acquired by SBC. So as you can tell, each of our speakers are in a position to give us some good insight into the industry. So with that said, let's go ahead and move to our questions. Now, the format we'll be doing here is we have some questions to ask that we prepared, and we're going to ask the question, and then I'll select one gentleman to start and give his answer, and then the others will chime in with their answers, and then we'll move on to the next question. So, first question, let's talk about the recent changes in the tower industry. The entire wireless industry has been enjoying an upswing in revenues and activity over the last couple of years. Thank goodness for all of us in this room. There's been heavy merger activity in the tower industry, including SBA's acquisition of AAT last year and Crown Castle's acquisition of Global Signal. What projections do you gentlemen have for the state of the tower industry through the rest of this year and even into 2008? Mr. Huff, let's start with you.
Certainly. Andy, first I wanted to, just thank you. I'd be remiss if we didn't say we're pleased with the invitation to come and answer some of your questions, number one. And number two, what a great turnout you have here. So hats off to everybody that's made the time for this. Secondly, I think, we acquired SpectraSite about, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And after the integration, we found that we always thought scale was very important from a tower company perspective. So, that integration has went well. I think that we, without question, are very, very pleased with the additional towers that we have. And that, I think scale is important. So when you talk about, what we foresee for the rest of the year as far as the tower companies are concerned, and then into next year, there potentially could be some assets coming on the market in a relatively short time. We don't see any big changes through the rest of 2007. But, I think the opportunity there is to continue to, grow asset bases and things of that nature, which I think we would find apropos based upon our first-hand experience with the last edition. So, exciting time right now. The next couple of years look, very good at this point in time with the auction that just occurred. And so I think there's some things that can happen there that, could be positive for the tower industry and the companies.
Great. Terry, how do you feel about 2007, 2008?
Well, again, like Doug, thank you for having us here and enjoying to be here with a great crowd. The wireless associations have been a big plus over the last years. As far as the wireless industry, it's I've been in 22 years. I've been doing this, and it's every couple of years you sit and say, well, it's only got another year or two before it's going to be over, and then what am I going to do then? And it's just tremendously how it's grown. And back in the early '90s when I was first with McCaw, they were hoping for maybe 1 million customers by the year 2000. Look at this, it's amazing. And since 2001, 2002, where we had some bad years, it's really taken off again. So, GTP started in 2002, basically really got going in 2003. We've seen a tremendous growth ourselves with 65 different acquisitions from getting acquired sites out there. We've built, hundreds plus towers that we're continuing to build out there. So we see our business as a tremendous growth internally for the rest of the year and through next year. We see American Towers, SBAs, and everything else doing the same thing. I think we're all very excited and all very, very happy about what's going on. The carriers are, maybe one of these days AT&T will get back to building some stuff. But we do enjoy what everybody else is doing, Verizon, T-Mobile, and so forth. So it's a great year, and we see 2008 is also being a great year.
Mr. Weiss.
Well, I'll echo the other two people about thanking you all for your hospitality. Thanking you, Andy, for putting this on, and Teresa for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel, as I said last time, a little bit like coming But to answer the question specifically, I guess I would have to step back just a little bit, maybe mention a little bit of what Terry said. And that is everybody in this room, including me, like to be untethered. We like mobility. In fact, I'm a little worried that I'll be able to stand still for the time I'm up here because I just like to move. And I told this story when I was with Connie up at a vast forum a month or two ago. But I was working for a regional bell holding company, and I walked into, and back in those days, there weren't a lot of real mobile networks out there. And I walked into a grocery store one time, and I saw a guy talking to his wife with this gigantic brick phone about what do I need to bring home for dinner tonight. And I was like, that is really cool. And I look now at where we're at, many, many years later, and I see as much opportunity in the next 5 years as I saw in the last 10. There aren't too many industries in the United States of America that can say that. Many people think, well, there's been all this consolidation, there's not much opportunity, they're all big companies, they're bureaucratic, it's not much fun to work in this industry anymore. I would say the next 5 years we're going to see a lot of changes, and they're going to be fun changes. Some of them will be difficult, some of them will be painful. But I think our industry is going to be in really good shape. I look specifically at '08 and '07, what's left of it. I think all of our customers, which I appreciate very much, will be very active. They need to be. I think the drivers haven't changed. They need to provide better quality service to stay in business. Number portability drove a little bit of that. But customers are just demanding more and more minutes of use, which is a great thing. So all the drivers behind the wireless industry have not changed. If anything, they've grown. And if you even look at your own families, take on mine as an example, if I asked my daughter whether she would like to give up her portable phone or her little pinky finger, I really believe she would take the phone. And I think that really bodes well for the future of our industry, because you go to schools, you go to places where kids hang out, and these kids love to have their phones. So I think the future is very, very bright for mobility for us in this industry. And without us, they really can't provide the service in a cost-effective way.
I'm sure not all the principals agree that they
No.
want those phones around. Well, Doug, you touched on this, and this kind of brings up the next question with regard to carrier relationships, which again is kind of the driving force and what we're all here to try and help foster. Let me ask this question. What effect do you believe the mergers in the tower industry have had on the relationship with the carriers? And kind of expanding on that a little bit, what effect do you believe the recent carrier mergers have had on the same relationship? So tower mergers, carrier mergers, how do they seem to, in your guys' eyes, be affecting what we do on a daily basis? Terry, let's start with you.
Certainly, starting with the tower company mergers, I think it's certainly had an effect on the carriers. It gets a little confusing of who's who out there. For example, there's a Global Tower Partners Incorporated that was out of Denver a few years ago that Doug knows because his company bought them, third hand, Doug? Clear Shot bought them, and you guys bought them, so, and we get their checks and so forth. He can come, Doug, he can come. But,
It's on the back.
Absolutely. But, so the consolidation of the tower industries, the different companies and the acquisitions, it certainly has an effect to the carriers in respect that it does become a little confusing. I'm sure it's created, a lot more positions in the property management groups in their companies as it has for us when they do mergers, because it goes both ways. So I think we're all used to those confusion things from both sides of it, and it's going to continue. It's just a matter, of course, of our business. And it's going to be there, and it's going to continue to be there. And I think we're going to see some more acquisitions within the tower industry as time goes on, whether it be some of the smaller ones or some of the larger ones over this year or next year. There'll be some different acquisitions, and now the carriers will look at that and say, well, just another one, and move on. And from a carrier standpoint, sometimes we welcome the mergers and acquisitions, and of course, like the AT&T and the Singular merger, how did it affect us? Well, certainly we all got hit with some of the decommissions of a lot of the sites, and that's something we don't like to see. Of course, losing losing leases and losing some of our customers on the sites, but for the most part, it's been somewhat smoothly done. Same thing with the Sprint and the Nextel merger, that it's still taking effect, as we all know out there. Sometimes good and some days are bad, but it's plodding along, and we're working with it. And it just is what it is. It's part of the industry. Take it for back.
Mr. Weeks?
Sure. I guess I step back just a half a step, Andy, if I could, and think about what our customers need from us in this room. And it really, to me, there's a lot of things we can say, but to me it boils down to two things. One is they really need speed to market. They need to get their sites on as quickly as they can because they are in a competitive environment. They need to improve their system. And secondly, they need to reduce their costs. And I think that second item will become much more important in the next 5 to 10 years than it has been in the last 10. So if you think about that umbrella of concerns our customers have, and I was one of them. I built networks and understand that mentality. And that mentality is a controlling mentality because the way you're managed in the wireless environment is through drop calls, and through system quality, and you want to control everything you can in order to make sure that you're judged appropriately and that you can provide the service that meets the customer's needs. That world, I think, will change as well. And I think if you look at the merger activity that is the question asked, those dynamics are changing, whether the carriers want to admit it or care to admit it. They are. And many of you may or may not have seen, there was an article yesterday in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the relationship between the wireless carriers and the handset makers, and how perhaps that might change as well. In the UK, they're very distinct. In the US, the wireless carriers like to control very much what the handset guys say and do and provide and not provide. That too will change. So the control mechanisms that the U.S. industry's had in place, I think, will alter a bit in the next 5 years. And that holds true also for the infrastructure players. Do I think there'll be more consolidation? Perhaps. I think that it's probably been a good thing because I think in many ways the carriers took the infrastructure business for granted. And I think that level playing field has begun to level off a little bit now where perhaps they need us as badly as we need them. So do I expect more mergers? Perhaps. I think that competition is good in the U.S. of A. We like to have lower prices. So I don't think you'll see mergers to the point where there's only one again, and all bell returns, whether it's in the tower business or whether it's in the carrier business. However, I think you'll continue to see dynamics that go on. And I think if you look into 08 and 09, and the amount of spectrum that's out there that's available, and some of the different players and the niche providers that are out there, and the dynamic changes that will occur as internet protocol takes a bigger piece of the network side of the business, there will be changes. And the control those carriers have had in the past won't be quite as intense as it has been, because there will be choices, and consumers will take those choices. And it's up to us, and those of us in this room, to help our customers through that, provide them with, again, those two elements that I mentioned at the beginning, faster business, faster way to sites, better services to get there, cheaper costs. And that infrastructure piece in terms of cost will become much more important in the future. So I guess in a nutshell, I think that business in the U.S. will continue to be dynamic. If I could predict who was going to merge with her, then I wouldn't be here. I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere. But I think there will be dynamic. And although I don't see a lot of carrier mergers happening, at least in the next 6 to 12 months, I may be surprised, but I don't see that happening unless you pick, for example, Leap or Metro that may come together. But short of that, I don't see a lot of real intense activity there.
Yes, Andy, I think the first point, the question that you posed was the tower industry consolidation, what effect it had in relation to the customers. And, as we've been through our integration of spectrum over the last little bit, we see it's been a very big benefit for us. I mean, the scale, again, that we've talked about in the first question matters. And, I think as we've done that, not only have we increased the size of the organization, the assets that are available, but I think we also put it at the same point in time, as Doug spoke, cycle time, speed to market is just as important as having the assets. And it has really been a focus that you have to have those two things in combo. You can't have the assets in trouble with your cycle times, and you can't have it vice versa. So I think we have seen some really, really wonderful relationships that we've expanded and developed by the tower consolidation, the question that you posed. And you know, I think we have more scale, and if we can deliver on the service side, you have both components of what really is needed to deliver an on-air solution very quickly. Those are things I think we really need to look at. We've been very pleased with what we've found there. And then I think secondly, your question was
The mergers with the
the carrier consolidation.
Relationship with the tower company.
Yeah, exactly. I think from our perspective, that's been a little bit different, and a little bit more challenging, only because I think the leadership has to get in place. So, you know, who's making decisions, you know, who's building, who's not building, is this going on hold, is this moving forward? And it gets back to technology, it gets back to lots of other things and items that impact what those decisions may be. So I think as you've seen the leadership get set in place, the organizational structure gets set, and the plans really being developed, that they're going to talk to their investors about how they're going to grow the company and return shareholder value and all those type of things over the next number of years. I think we're now beginning to see that the combination of those two things happening is really going to be a benefit for the industry, I think, over the long term. So I think that's our perspective or take on it at this point.
Thursday, and you're right.
Short and sweet.
There's a big white light on here, honestly.
Coming from somewhere.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about the individual companies you folks represent. What are specifically your company's plans for future asset growth? Now, obviously, you know, divulge any company secrets and so forth, but in essence, you know, do you plan to expand your current tower portfolios? If so, are you mainly looking to acquire existing or build out new or some combination? So, Mr. Weaver, let's start with you since you had your big on first.
I'll be happy to answer that. Our company has gone and will be going through a little bit of a transition. We've been owned by a very large UK-based utility for the last 5 years, and we'll be leaving that umbrella in another month or so. The reason for that is that they have made a strategic decision to exit all of their businesses other than utilities, gas, and electric. So actually the future for us is even more exciting than it has been in the past. And we're not just a tower company. We're a little bit different. Of course, there's a different color up here on the stand than the other folks, because we are what I would call an infrastructure company. So we provide not just tower assets, which we do, but we also provide DAS structures as well as dark fiber and lit fiber to our customers. And so what we try to do is solve problems customers have, and they have a lot of problems, and most of them revolve around how can they provide something quicker, cheaper, and faster. So I think in terms of the tower assets specifically, we expect to be active in the marketplace over the next few months and the next year. We will continue to augment our tower industry. We like the tower business. We have good experience. We have a lot of good people that have been in the tower business for a while. And so we'll be looking at both growing internally, developing towers, as well as acquiring. But we'll also be expanding and growing in other parts of our business as well.
Reason specifically for me to ask that question.
Yeah.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes, I think we can talk rather openly about our CEO, Jim Takelet, has unabashedly speaks to this many times to the investor community. So, I think, again, we keep hitting on scale, and I think we do believe it's important. I think the right assets at the right price at the right time. American Tower is absolutely looking to grow its asset base, but we're going to do a good deal and one that will be accretive to the shareholders and things of that nature. So I think that is really the perspective that we have at this point, and it could be internationally, it could be in the U.S. I mean, there's some different markets that we've spoken about looking at. So if anybody has some towers they want to sell, you should give us a call.
Any hands?
Yeah. But no, I think it's important to us to continue to expand our organization, and if we can do that in the right fashion, we will. And then also, as far as new builds, we've kind of adjusted our ROI expectations, and I think we're looking to enter the fray in the new build market. We've got the in-building group that we inherited from Spectre Site when that acquisition happened. That has been a nice add for us. And I think lastly, our leverage for the company and our financial position is such that we really could probably be in a position to do most any deal that we think is the right deal to do. So I think that's really our answer. I think we'd like to grow the company.
And half the money will buy.
That's right.
That's
right.
Mr. Armand, tell us about local tower partners.
We're going to buy American Tower.
All right.
I've got some pocket change, Doug. Well, Global Towers, of course, is, we talked about before, is basically a 3.5-year-old company. In 3.5 years, we've grown from basically 0 towers to over 2,400 towers that we own. And we've done that through mostly acquisitions. Like I said, 65 different acquisitions, from 1 and 2 tower acquisitions to our largest one being the Dobson Communication Tower that we had purchased, and that was 563 towers. So we are continuing very much so with our M&A group to look at any and all acquisitions that are out there. And again, whether they're 1 or 2 towers, and like Doug, raise your hand if you got some. We're always interested in looking at them. And we are currently looking at several different, smaller acquisitions and some larger acquisitions. So, through the acquisition part of it, the M&A, that's definitely what we're looking to do. And we are foremost a tower company. That is our business. That's what we're going to stick to. We're not doing site acquisition or construction work. We don't have any plans of diversifying. Been there, done that, and not going to do it again. So, from that standpoint, and plus building, a lot of build-to-suit work that we're doing for several different clients out there, and we're going to continue on that. Like Doug says, we've had to adjust our ROI because there's a lot of small people out there that have learned build-to-suit and got some $25 million in financing and trying to do build-to-suit work, and so it's been very competitive. And at least for Hunter, it's been kind of a build-to-suit with a different kind for you, right? You got your sport coat. Anyway, Bill Mace is there. So we're, our plans are to continue that growth in respect of the acquisitions and the new builds. From an investment standpoint, we were originally financed back in 2003 with Great Hill Partners. In April of 2005, we were very lucky to have the Blackstone Group and come in and buy out Great Hills for a nice little sum of money. And they've been a tremendous partner for us for the last year and a half, and will continue to be. And very supportive of both the acquisitions that we've done and a lot of the future acquisitions that we see out there, which are going to be some large ones coming up this year. And we expect to see some of that going on again more next year. I think the carriers, even though some of them may never sell their towers, there's certainly going to be a couple more of those out there. So we look forward to the competition of some large acquisitions coming up.
Well, I don't know if you folks knew this or not, but our photographer, Scott Montgomery, is an auctioneer, so we can start auctioning off. Let's talk about something that probably most of us in this room deal with at some point, and that's zoning. Because I know you guys are aware of it at your level even. It seems that zoning for towers and other wireless installations is getting tougher and tougher, which I guess is good for me in a way. How do you feel the wireless industry is doing in educating local governments and zoning officials with regard to our need to obtain zoning approval? So how do you think the folks out here are doing? How are your companies doing? And you guys have any insight on that? So we'll start with you.
Sure.
Mr. Hunt, we'll start with you.
There you go. Yeah, I think we're probably a little behind the curve. I think some of these consultants and the jurisdictions are using probably got out a little bit ahead of us, and has probably caused a little disruption in our business with some of the direction that they've been providing, which we think is challenging in some regards. But I believe that some of the initiatives, the SWAP, and some of the initiatives that we've talked about, you guys have spoken about over the last couple of days, certainly will help progress the industry to hopefully a level playing field. Co-locations specifically, new builds are different. Co-locations, you would think they would be able to be pushed through as any other zoning item that may be required by a local jurisdiction. And I think we need to work very hard as an industry, as a group, to try and get that message out to as many jurisdictions as we can. And it's a big task with everyone that you have to deal with during this process. So we really believe that this is a valuable step that is being taken within the group here. And we've got, goodness, we've probably got 30, 40 zoning folks that work within American Tower. Liz, I know you're here, and we paid great attention to this, and we need this for timeline. It's going to affect everybody. So I think again, the efforts that are ongoing has to continue and get ramped up to it in a significant way.
Terry, how do you feel we've been doing, and what do you think we can do to improve?
Well, zoning is, as we all know, been a continuation of a problem where you say, oh, just again, part of our history. And like, having done this for 22 years, even back in the 80s when I was actually spent a lot of time in zoning meetings. When I first got started, I was doing site acquisition work. And like a lot of us here, we've all started from in the trenches and worked our way up, top of towers or whatever. But zoning, it's scalable. I mean, I look at it back in the 80s, it wasn't that much better. It really wasn't. I mean, I can remember a little upstate New York community that back in about 87, 88, where we had 200 people against us building a tower in the middle of nowhere up near, I think it's Dryden, New York. And we came out that night outside the meeting, and one of our site acquisition people that was with us had a flat tire because somebody cut it. So you had the rough stuff going on back in the 80s, and you have the stuff going on now. And really what it's all about is NIMBYs. It's basically NIMBYism. It's always going to be, always has been there. People back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, put up a heck of a fight for telephone poles when they first started putting them up. So it's really no different than it ever was. We just have to work with it. We have to always be out there in front of the best we can, be proactive, especially when we're going into a tight community where it's a tough situation. We do need to go in there and work with their people, work with their boards especially, and be proactive with them in respect of where can we go best? Where can we eliminate the problems that may ensue when we go in there and put our application in? But it's not going to stop it. NIMBY is always going to be there. We all have things we just don't want to be in our backyard. Towers, unfortunately, the proliferation of it that's going out there is another one of it. So are we going to ever prevent it? No. Legislation is ever going to stop it. That would certainly help. Like, of course, 96 Telecom Act helped a lot of the RF issues that were the real paramount thing that we went through in the 80s and early 90s was RF, and that was a big problem. By taking that bite out of them, we've now brought it down to aesthetics and property values more than anything else. But what can we do about it? Certainly some state legislations that are going on today, I think will be a help. I think what the PCIA is doing and trying to work with a lot of the both communities as well as the states and the federal government is a big help, and it will continue to be a big help to smooth things here and there. And we all have to obviously work on picking the right site, the right place.
Mr. Weiss?
Well, I'm not sure I can add too much more color to it. I'll pick up on what Terry said about people that don't like towers. There is a certain subset in the United States that doesn't like towers. I happen to be married to one of them. And I see them as things of beauty, and he obviously doesn't. People don't like them. And I suspect people particularly don't like them when they're in their backyard. But I think where we miss out a little bit, and I would also say when I was here in the South, it was a whole lot easier than it is now. You ought to come to the Northeast. It's the Yankees. They're pretty rough up there. And so it's gotten. I'm not sure I really understood zoning until I went up there. I mean, it's tough. I think the one piece that maybe we don't do a good enough job at, I live in a particular community that's probably about as NIMBY, tree-hugging community you could live in. I go to community meetings at night, and I wonder if I'm really in the right country sometimes. But I remember this last winter, a lady in the nearby neighborhood was out cross-country skiing with her two dogs. And for whatever reason, the dogs attacked her. Seriously attacked her, went after her. She killed her, or whatever. And what saved her was her ability to grab her phone and make a phone call to 911, saved her life. And I think that's the piece that we don't really drive home enough. So when you're out in the community, there certainly are constituents that say, we got to have service because I can't do my business without this service. And then they've got other constituents that say, no, over my dead body. And I think that's kind of the point. It might be over their dead body if we don't explain to them the safety opportunities of the service that we help provide to the citizens of the U.S. And I think we need to do a better job there, because I think when push comes to shove, people will put up with a little bit of visual pollution if they know they'll be safer, if they know their families will be safer. So I think that's one area that we can work on. I certainly support all the work that's kind of generated out of Alabama in Tennessee and even Georgia in working with states and trying to find ways legislatively to smooth out that process. Because without a voice, the smaller voice, which is very large on the NIMBY side, will outweigh it. And sometimes that's not in the best interest of the citizens of our states and our country. So I think we need to keep pushing it. And I think safety is one area that we probably have to push on.
Well, and you guys are touching on somewhat of our next question, which talks about the state legislation and what we're trying to do. Tennessee, Florida, and California have been successful in passing some statewide legislation to, restrict the zoning regulations that we go through. Alabama's in the process of trying. North Carolina, South Carolina, and Hawaii have actually drafted legislation to become work on it. And I guess that kind of leads to the next question, and you guys have touched on a little bit. I mean, that seems to be a way that the industry at least thinks to attack it. And you guys don't necessarily disagree with what I'm gathering. That's the way to go about it, you think? Again, let's start with you guys.
Certainly, yeah, because I do believe some of those are, each one of those bills are a little bit different. Some were great successes, some were a little chink in the armor. But I think anything that we can do in that area is definitely going to be beneficial. There's probably not anybody's got anything in Florida here, but in Duval County in Florida, they ended up putting in a 1.15% structural factor, as they were calling the towers in that county, specific communication or required communication structures. So all of a sudden you put another 15% demand on the structure, and you end up basically you're going to fail every the majority of what you have sitting in that county. So I know that's something that's an example of what's being worked by not just us, but a few other folks that are on the team that we're addressing this with. I think we're hopefully going to get to a relatively acceptable solution from both parties. But it's these type of things that continue to come down the path that, if we could find ways. I think some of those bills you spoke of, Andy, really, again, co-location, should be much easier than it is. A new build, okay, let's
We've been using the term co-location by right.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
where we've been trying to push that.
Right, so.
That should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, you get to the point, you're not asking a retail company coming to an organization or to the county that's going to build. You're not asking them to show me your business plan to prove you need something here. I don't know why it should be any different once the tower and the assets in place. So, those are important things that's being driven by the groups we're talking about, and hopefully continue.
Well, Terry and Doug Weiss, you guys have touched on it. That seems to be the way it's going, the state route. At the local level, it's a little bit tougher to move the opposition there, and pretty good also from the local residents. Is there any other ideas or anything you've seen around the country working that might be a help to that?
I don't think I'd add anything other than I think your point about co-location by right makes total sense. It's the best thing for our constituents out there in the state. And I guess the only thing I would say is it's a little bit frustrating because it's slow, it's tedious, it's frustrating. But I really think that's the way to get there at the end of the day. Because if you don't, you really get left behind by those that are more vulnerable.
And, the states, anything they can do to help make it easier in the communities, not just for us, for the carriers, of course, but I think, the reality, the communities themselves would welcome a lot of the states to make it easier, because as we know, it's political. The local level, a lot of it's politics. The local neighbor that doesn't want it, that NIMBY that doesn't want it in his backyard, he's got some power in that community where he's just going to raise a ruckus. So we've all seen some boards just simply pass, or not pass, but just negate a situation and turn down an application, and knowing we're going to go to court and we're going to win, but that's their only political option. So if they had some legislation that was there to make it easy for them, I think they would breathe a sigh of relief in a lot of those places. Sure, they want control of their areas, and certainly they have the right to, we want them to, but I think with some, at least basic, especially co-location has my right, that takes a lot of the clout out of what they have to do politically within their own communities. So we welcome that, and again, we certainly help support anything we can within the states to do that.
Moving forward or affecting the industry as we move down the road, if that's something you guys are interested in participating in or watching how it develops. We'll start with you, Terry.
All right. First of all, I want to know how you guys, when you tell your spouses you're going to swap every night, how that works. But, you know, I have watched the organizations grow over the last couple. You write that one down. That's SWAP.
You don't want to answer it, you just want to write it down. Right.
You know, we've watched these grow over the last couple of years, and it's been very exciting. You know, I'm a big advocate of this, and I've attended several of them, and will continue. Like, I was out in California a couple months ago when they had their first one in Newport Beach, and they had the biggest one so far. Sorry, Jeff. And Texas got beat with 357 people, I believe, and I got to watch our Billy Graham cellular hunter out there speaking. That was an exciting, and that was just a luncheon. They didn't even the night before wasn't that much, but the luncheon was great. 350 people show up. It was just exciting. So it's great to see that people, and of course the carriers, the vendors, even the local politicians, where there are several of them were there at that meeting, to get together and trade ideas, just meet, just socially, like we're all doing here today. I think it's a fantastic thing. Some of us get to go to the PCIA and the CTIA shows. We've been doing it for years. I remember going to the first CTIA show back in 1986 when there was 75 people in a hotel room in Scottsdale. And now we got 27,000 people go to that meeting. So, but we don't all get to go to that. And it's a 3-day meeting, and a lot of the carriers now won't let their people go, even their executives. So having these functions where people can get out for a couple hours during the middle of the day, and especially with the carriers are allowed to go out, I think it's just a fantastic thing. And just the socialization, meeting with each other, and enjoying it. And we very actively will continue to promote those. The hard part is for some of our salespeople that are out there, like Tim Conti's, and they've got the Northeast Territory for GTP, and he's got like 12 different states, and he's got like 8 different association meetings he has to go to every week. So he's a very busy guy.
Mr. Weiss?
I won't add too much more. Other than, I guess the one thing I've been impressed with even in the last couple of days is listening and talking to folks that are involved in the leadership as well as participants. The passion that seems to be involved in this room around trying to improve the voice of our industry. It's very impressive, I have to say. And I think by virtue of the fact that you're doing it right, by setting goals, by trying to actually get things accomplished, that the future's probably bright. And I would encourage you to keep it up.
I will have to say, probably, when I first started, 6 years or so, probably 4 years ago, I probably, the banter around the office or some of our meetings, I didn't hear much about this, frankly. But I do believe the last year or two, and again, it's a leadership point to a big degree. These are very important associations for American talent, for the industry. We do support them in every locale I think that they exist in. And, just some of the initiatives I think are going on. It's a lot of the ordinances that come out, things of that nature that you have to be cognizant of. I mean, to have someone that's a persistent, consistent voice of the industry in each one of these meetings, voicing the perspective and the position that the industry has, I think is tremendously important. And if we all had to do that individually, you could never get it done. It would be impossible. So, I think the void was there, and I think the associations have really stepped in to area of need, and I think there could be some significant contributions that they make over the next number of years. So hats off to the folks that are here driving those associations all across the country, obviously, when you had your little introduction. So we do appreciate it. Yeah, we do appreciate what you do every day. There's no question about it.
Are there any questions from the audience that we would like to throw these gentlemen's way? Jeff?
You talked about some of the challenges that you face with zoning and code and areas here, cost of acquisition, things on this. Curious with the great rush of builds that we had in the late 90s through about 2001, and now with these legacy towers, we'll call them, loading up and aging up, what challenges do you see over the next couple of years with the overlays and new activity coming in, and how do you guys kind of face these challenges?
The question was, what types of challenges do these gentlemen see with the overlays and things coming in with all the towers that are out there currently?
Probably part of that is what Ed talked about this morning with his G-forces, right? And now that the towers, in some cases, they're going to be easier from a structural standpoint because some locations in other areas it's going to be tougher. And, you know, we certainly have all had to budget a lot more money for structural upgrades. And, you know, what some of the carriers are wanting to put up there, you know, what Sprint was wanting for a while with their CDMA and Nextel, and a lot of the towers added a lot of wind load to the towers, and the additional cables. Now they want to put like 24 cables. So, you know, certainly from a structural standpoint, we've had to, like I said, budget a lot more money. We've had to be a lot more proactive to try to go out there and ensure that our towers are capable, especially some of the older ones. You know, certainly all of us in our acquisitions have got some towers that are dated way back into the 60s and 70s in some cases, and that was back, you know, pre-A code, I think, wasn't it? So it's there's a lot of work out there that we've had to do, but you know, there's still a lot of space left out there. And now with AT&T decommissioning some of it and Sprint some, that we got some extra space here and there too.
One of the Doug, you want to jump in?
Yeah, a couple of things really. I think the question is twofold, right? Do I have an overlay coming in, or do I have new business coming in? I think both those are different answers. As far as the overlays coming in, you know, we really haven't, I don't think we've found many towers that we can't modify to accommodate the equipment that's coming. So I think that's number one that we have to consider. And also, you know, I think just over the period of time, you may have dishes that can move. You may have, you know, canceled equipment. You may have other things that can help the capacity. You really need to be having intelligent, smart folks that are looking at your co-location process to be able to free up capacity. And I think that's one of the things that all the tower companies should be if they're not focusing on. So I think the capacity, to whether it's the capacity for an overlay, you know, it will become an issue, but it's not an issue we can't figure out, we can't solve. So I think that's the first answer. As far as new co-locations, again, I think the capacity issue, we can still solve that issue. I think then what happens is RAD height and RAD locations and demands that the RF folks place come into play. So you may have something that you can upgrade capacity-wise, but at the same time, you may not have the RAD center. You may be on a monopole smoke from 120 to 160, and you have to find a solution. You can extend it, or you go below, one of the two, so you don't have any interferences that are there. So, you know, I think that's the second topic, but again, I think then you got to go to the new build, greenfield type solution, and you know, obviously there's some additional time and effort and things that go into that play, but I think something we deal with, frankly.
What was the question? I don't have a whole lot to add. I would say, in our specific case, we've got quite a bit of capacity for certain towers. I'm not too worried. But looking out, you could envision, you know, Doug mentioned where the new spectrum may go. It could go in a variety of different ways, one of them being a whole new entrant, or perhaps two. And how do you deal with that? And so I think there will be challenges on the structural side in the future. Again, we won't have a specific problem, at least today on our inventory. But you may have to start thinking about what our carriers, our customers think of as heresy, which is sharing. You know, maybe even sharing an antenna. Couldn't say.
I'll try.
Wait a minute. But I will tell you, you know, you can do it and it works. We've seen it. We've seen our customers share antennas. You know what? The sun still came up. It was okay. And by the way, their networks were better. So I think there will be some very different things that will happen in the next 5 years that haven't happened before. And I think that's one way you may have to attack some of the demands on some of our towers that are just overloaded.
Any other questions? I think we're about right on time. Let me, again, thank everybody for coming. Let me specifically thank you three gentlemen.
Of course. Thanks for
Really
having us.
appreciate you taking the time to come to town, enlightening us on some of these issues. Looks like everybody should probably be dusting off their golf gloves starting in August and October. So get ready. We really appreciate you coming, and we hope to see you at the next state wireless show, wherever it may be, in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, or in New York with Doug, or somewhere else.